All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sybil Preby. I'm an associate professor at the North Dakota State College of Science in Wapaton, North Dakota. And if you want, you can take down the link to these slides. It's a bit.ly URL with the backslash there, Tyca in all caps, then a dash, open in all caps, a dash, and then 2021. So to start, I'll just repeat what my presentation title is. Don't open up the economy, open up education. The future of education is open, open as in free, accessible materials, ungrading, and other assessment strategies and inclusive policies. Open up the economy, they said. No, I thought open up education. What could an open education look like at a two-year college or university? Could it include the decolonization of our syllabi and content? Could it encompass inclusive policies instead of rigid ones? Could it contain less control and much more flexibility? And could it just be as freeing for faculty as it is for students? This session will take participants through what open ed looks like, what OERs are, and what open pedagogy and those practices can look like as well. So everything open. And there are a lot of slides here. I will not be speaking to each one of them. This is way too long if I go through every one of them. So I will be picking them apart, picking out the ones that I really want to focus in on for all of you. And here's the table of contents for anyone who likes those types of things. OER, Open Educational Resources, are high quality teaching, learning, and research materials that are free for people everywhere to use and repurpose. OERs are any type of educational materials that are in the public domain or introduced with an open license. Here's the best part. Why consume when you can create? And the difference between OER and then just regular good old free online resources, OER comes to us usually with some kind of Creative Commons license on it or a public domain license. Free online resources are wonderful too, like the Khan Academy and TED Talks, but we are not able to freely remix those typically, and that's the difference between OER and free online resources. Here are the 5 R's as described by David Wiley. This is what we can do typically with an OER. So if I have a textbook in front of me that has the right sort of license, I can typically reuse it, the one at the top there. To the right, I can remix it, combine pieces of it with other OER. At the bottom left there, the right to revise it and alter the content by maybe taking the names of students in the pieces and making them less white sounding, for instance. Now let's look at the Creative Commons themselves. When it comes to the Creative Commons, there are various different licenses you can use. To the left here, we have showing you what, at the very top are the most open pieces. So if you have a license that is, for instance, just CC BY, the middle one of the top green piece there, that means I just want attribution because of the little person there. That means attribution piece. The one below it, CC BY SA, means I would like attribution. So I do want some credit that you're using my OER. And then the SA means to share it alike. So you probably should put a more lenient license on something that I have shared with you. You should probably use my license, if not something more strict. So that's how those work, and they're very helpful. If you are like me and you have textbooks that you don't want people making money off of, you could go to the light green area there and use the CC BY NC, and that means the NC means non-commercial, so they cannot make money off of it. That's pretty helpful for faculty who want to share with their students, want to share with other faculty, but don't want publishing companies swiping their stuff. Here are some open textbooks for us to consider using. And here are the common uses for them. Essentially replacing a textbook helps with just retention of students, but also you can use remixed versions of manuals and guides. There are collections out there and anthologies of things that you can use. And what happens with OER textbooks too, as because they are student-centered, they become renewable. You can have students work on them with you. You can change them as students find issues with certain chapters, or and you can also find partnerships within them too. Maybe if your book is a history book, you'll go to a museum or library and find a partnership with the librarians there that can help. Here are just a few of the textbook links I go to, and textbooks in general. For those of you who use they say I say, the very fourth bullet there mentions a couple of substitutions for that popular textbook. My favorite part of open education is the pedagogy and the practices. Essentially, open pedagogy is a process of designing architectures and using tools for learning that enable students to shape the public knowledge of commons in which they are a part. Open pedagogy or open educational practices connect to a few things, and the things I will speak to are decolonization, inclusive design, accessibility, and ungrading. So what is decolonization? Decolonization is about reclaiming what was taken and honoring what we still have. This takes conscious work and effort. There's value in actively seeking what was lost and remembering what was forgotten. Decolonizing and anti-oppressive pedagogies are, by their very nature, resisting mainstream approaches to teaching and learning, as well as challenging taken for granted assumptions embedded in the status quo. And decolonizing and anti-oppressive approaches focus on challenging and disrupting the status quo of mainstream education. In other words, just because something is does not mean it should be. And this is probably one of my favorite slides, because the very second bullet there, I'm not saying diversify your syllabus, I'm saying decolonize. And the piece that I really want to focus in on here is, whoops, I'm gonna go back here. In order to truly shake shit up, you should primarily teach Indigenous and people of color texts. I'm not calling for people to sprinkle in more works by Indigenous and people of color writers. I'm calling for them to make these voices the dominant ones in their classroom. The question I would ask is, why do we teach Shakespeare and some of the dead white males? What would our syllabus look like without them? Here's an important thing to consider too. Who is the average student? The classroom, far from neutral, is constructed for a mythical, able-bodied, neurotypical norm that neither reflects nor accommodates the wide range of diverse learners within it, regardless of whether these learners have been diagnosed with a disability. One thing I am trying to do more often is include audio for all of my chapters. Not all of my students need audio, but if it helps even one student, whether they have a disability or not, I feel like that is a win, and that makes the learning and the knowledge in my classroom more accessible to all. Design that it considers the full range of human diversity with respect to ability, language, culture, gender, age, and other forms of difference. That is inclusive design. When it comes to open ed and open practices, I often think that we need to open up our assessment pieces, and I've gotten recently into ungrading. Ungrading basically is a theory, I suppose, that says giving feedback plus grades is not helpful for student learning, because students look at the grade and then toss the paper or project. They learn so much more if there's feedback and reflection involved. Elfie Cohn and Peter Elbow and others will tell you that attaching grades to feedback means students just look at the grades. If learning is key and feedback encourages learning, then we have to ditch the letter grades or points to a certain extent. So here are some tough things to consider, start by trusting your students. Maybe get on Twitter and follow a few people that use the ungrading method or theory. There's a folder of resources there for you as well. And open assessment can look like a couple of different things. Contract grading is one that's kind of in that realm, having students assess themselves, and then the use of process letters and reflection letters. Here are just a few other open practices that I've been trying to include in my courses, and it includes open policies too. Having a note late work policy, students should not feel the need to learn on my designated timetable. I need to open up and allow that flexibility. Redos are allowed and encouraged. I have open and flexible attendance using the high flex model. Yes, it is a little more stressful on me to record myself at every class session, but if it helps a student, feel like the class is more accessible to them, the learning is more accessible to them, then that's all I really care about. Open submission, maybe we should get rid of the Times New Roman requirement on all papers and things like that. Try to let them submit in different ways, in different formats. Open citation style is pretty blasphemous. I've gotten to the point where I wonder if they really need to know that when they walk out, especially if they are not a transfer student. But that is a very blasphemous thing to consider. And then there's open collaboration that a lot of people use using the app called Hypothesis. Here are just a few projects that I have considered, especially the very first bullet there. Students could create, when you have an open pedagogical approach to your class, they could help you create the textbook and chapters that go into your textbook. They could create videos, podcasts, infographics, memes, educational apps or games if you're in more of the computer science realm. They could create the lesson plans or learning activities. Why not have a collaborative Pinterest board if you are collecting historical tidbits and things like that? The rest of these slides have quite a few links that you can help yourselves to. If you have any questions, please let me know.